The most effective lies are built out of truth. And that is why you keep doubting yourself instead of what you should be doing, which is doubting him. This is how abusive men lie, by using these little grains of truth, and how that tactic keeps you stuck trying to sort facts instead of see the pattern that's right in front of you. You're standing there listening to him talk, and nothing about the moment feels explosive, which is exactly why you second guess yourself. He's not yelling. He isn't denying everything. He looks calm, maybe even reasonable. And that alone is going to lower your guard before you realize that it's even happening. He's like, yeah, I was stressed. I was short with you. Work has been so brutal today. And you nod because that part's accurate, right? You're not trying to be unfair. You remember the long day. You know that there was tension. You heard the edge in his voice and your body relaxes a little bit. And then he adds, but you're blowing this out of proportion. And suddenly there's the shift, right? How the conversation just kind of moves. Now you're not talking about his behavior anymore. You're talking about whether or not your reaction was appropriate. And they always flip it. This is just a classic move, right? You start replaying the moment in your head. He's still talking, but you keep replaying it. You are still in the same room as him, but mentally you've moved from impact to self-evaluation. That's where he wants you. He wants you considering what you said, what you did. You're tracking details instead of tracking the pattern. And this shift is never an accident. It is actually the mechanism that keeps this all moving forward. The truth that he offered, it's not accountability. I know it can kind of sound like it, but it was just an entry point. And the cost is that the original harm disappears and you're busy here being precise. I'm Lisa Sonni. I work daily with women in abusive relationships and trauma-bonded dynamics. I see this exact pattern play out over and over and over again. I'm a certified relationship coach. I'm an author of 4 books, including Narcissism Unmasked. Now, this whole grain of truth bit, it works because your brain treats truth as a safety signal, right? When something checks out, when the details make sense, when they line up, when emotion sounds plausible, your nervous system is just going to kind of relax. But that's before your logic has time to catch on to what's really going on. So you stop evaluating the person, the man in front of you, and you start evaluating the information. That distinction matters so much more. Don't gloss over that. Once you're actually inside the content of what he's saying, you're no longer standing outside the behavior, asking whether the behavior is acceptable. You start asking whether every sentence you said is fair and whether each word is technically correct. We sort of shift almost into semantic abuse here, don't we? You're worried about whether or not you're being too harsh or rude. Effective deception doesn't always sound dramatic or chaotic even. It can sound kind of measured and calm. It sounds thoughtful, like somebody who could be right. And I'm telling you, that's all they need sometimes. When I hosted a private event recently inside my online community, She Rises Collective, I had Dr. George Simon on, and he actually named it so plainly. The most effective lies use grains of truth. He's written this in his books. Not outright fabrications, not wild denials, but real facts kind of arranged to protect the speaker and, of course, destabilize the listener. And that lie isn't really that nothing happened. It's that what happened doesn't actually mean what you think it means. What a mind F. And because part of it is true, you stay engaged instead of pulling back. Now, put this inside an intimate relationship where attachment is already active and the stakes are very personal. You're not listening to a stranger. You are listening to someone that you love, someone that you've trusted, someone whose approval still matters to you. So your brain is now tracking accuracy, but also connection. It's asking whether pushing back is going to cost you something, right? And it always does. Closeness and peace, or the stability, the peace of the weekend, right? So he offers you this version of events, basically, that partially agrees with you, and your system's going to grab onto it. It can be very unconscious. You feel relief because maybe it kind of sounds like progress, right? He's almost taking accountability. Now we're getting somewhere. You feel hope because he didn't deny everything. And that hope, which is a big mechanism here, it keeps you listening even as the meaning completely changes. This is why women don't leave after one conversation. This is why things feel almost resolved, but then repeat. And this tactic isn't really to convince you that he's innocent. That's not really what this is. Plenty of them like, oh, you need to believe me, but really don't miss what's really going on. They just want to keep you engaged long enough that accountability is never going to be there. You say you embarrassed me in front of your family and you're kind of now like bracing yourself, right? Because you were vulnerable. He doesn't deny it outright. He says, I was joking. That's just how my family jokes. Okay, maybe it didn't land perfectly. Okay, true enough. He was joking and his family does joke like that. And he's right, it didn't land well. But then comes the turn, right? You're really sensitive lately. You turn everything into a problem. Now you're gone, right? You're not even thinking about the humiliation anymore. You're thinking about whether you've changed, whether you said it right, whether you're being too sensitive, if stress has made you reactive. Maybe you think you're being unfair. So you shrink the issue so it kind of fits his explanation. Again, this is usually unconscious, but this is what's going on. Nothing about that exchange that I just described required him to lie cleanly. It wasn't an overt lie. He just needed to like redirect the meaning, And because part of it was true, you feel like compelled to meet him in the middle. You catch something that doesn't sit right, maybe messages, inconsistencies, some kind of feeling you can't shake, some lack of trust. And he says, I didn't cheat. Nothing physical happened. Maybe that's accurate. Maybe nothing physical did happen. But while you're stuck debating definitions of whatever happened, we're not talking about the betrayal anymore, right? The betrayal's gone. The secrecy's gone. We're not talking about that. The emotional investment disappears. And you find yourself asking what counts, what matters, instead of what you should be looking at, which is, why did he break your trust? So the grain of truth becomes the anchor that keeps you arguing about these friggin' semantics instead of addressing the abusiveness, the harm. And because you can't prove the rest, you hesitate. You tell yourself, you know what? I need more information, more certainty. I need more time. Meanwhile, the relationship stays exactly where it is. But let's talk about the times that there is actually just like an outright lie. And the structure doesn't even change. The system is still working exactly as it is. You find the messages, it's right there in black and white. Or you feel it before you see it because, hey, you always do, right? Our intuition. So you ask him directly and he's like, I didn't cheat. That's the lie. Very clean, very simple. And then immediately, here comes the grains of truth. Nothing physical happened. It was just texting. I told you about her. You're acting like I slept with her. You're no longer sitting with the fact that he lied. You are now debating definitions. You're asking what counts. Do you see how it's the same thing? You're wondering whether the betrayal is actually betrayal. He didn't cheat. He just emotionally cheated. He cheated. You start comparing your reaction to the crime, right? Is this worthy of getting this mad? Instead of asking, why did he hide it at all? He's got you off the issue. And because some of what he said is technically true, your brain is going to grab on to that instead of the bigger reality because it's too painful. Secrecy's gone. The deception's gone. You're not talking about that anymore. Even his choice to lie, and he made a choice, gone. All that's left is you trying to be fair, trying to understand, trying to have the right reaction. So even when the lie is real, the structure is the same. The truth is used to make it a little bit more soft, to sort of redirect it and to keep you engaged in this dumb conversation long enough that accountability never lands. This is why women end up in this analysis loop. You keep replaying conversations and writing things down and trying to remember exact wording. This is what we do after prolonged gaslighting. You're trying to reconcile pieces of reality that were literally never meant to form a coherent whole. When I interviewed Dr. Bonaro, what stood out was not flashy tells or dramatic lies. It was how ordinary, effective deception sounds. I really encourage you to check out that episode of my podcast, Real Talk with Lisa Sonni, Relationships Uncensored. It was so good. We really got into the science of deception. The truth is, deception doesn't always rely on charm, right? It relies on cognition. Once your brain is willing to accept parts of the story as true, it fills in the gaps on its own. And you're here doing the work for him. You're making his story make sense for him. You start questioning yourself instead of questioning the frame that you've been handed. And that's really hard to step out of this. But what this does to you over time is brutal because it's really not about one argument or one lie, right? You've been through this how many times? Too many. So you stop trusting your first read of situations. You start kind of asking permission for your reactions. Even if you're not overtly asking, you're tiptoeing around it. You delay decisions because you're not sure enough to act. So you stay longer than you plan to. You promised yourself you're going to break up with him the next time he lies, but you need more clarity. That's what it feels like. So your energy goes into understanding him and it's not on protecting yourself anymore. And slowly, your life gets smaller, your world gets smaller, and your attention stays on the relationship because it never really resolves. Nothing ever really makes sense. So you're always so close to the truth, but not quite there, and you think you need more information. You don't need to be threatened when you're destabilized enough to hesitate. Now, let's say you're standing in your kitchen, it's late at night, you didn't really plan to talk because you're already tired. He asks you something like, why you've been distant. And you say, you are so tired of feeling dismissed and ignored. And he kind of nods at you and he's like, I know, I haven't been present. I've been checked out. I own that. So you relax, right? Relief comes here. That sounded like accountability, didn't it? Then comes, but you shut down and you punish me instead of communicating. And that makes it so impossible for me to show up and be really present in this relationship. Now here you are examining yourself again, your tone, your timing, when you've been quiet or not, and you leave the conversation yet again feeling responsible while yet again nothing changes. And that scene repeats. And it does that because it works. Partial agreement, redirected responsibility, unresolved harm. So typical. Now, people who use this tactic, they're not confused, right? He just doesn't understand. He understands. They are not muddled thinkers, okay? This is not what's happening. They are not struggling to express themselves. They know exactly which parts to concede and which parts to distort. They offered just enough truth and it leaves them still credible, but just enough redirection sprinkled in to avoid accountability. This is so common in abusive dynamics because it allows control, but it doesn't give them the exposure of that, right? Plausible deniability. He can say he took responsibility, but he's still in power. He can say he understands, but nothing changes. So if he understood, wouldn't something change? No, because he does understand and he doesn't want it to change. And often there's no obvious cruelty. I realize sometimes, but not always. And all you're focused on is whether or not you're even allowed to be upset at all. Now, here's the correction, okay? This matters. Stop trying to separate what parts are true and which parts aren't. That's a losing game. That's the game he wants you to play. The tell is actually not whether each sentence is accurate. The tell is what happens to you while you're listening. Flip this here. Think right here. How do you feel? Truth doesn't leave you all scrambled in your brain. Real accountability doesn't make you feel confused or quiet or small or unsure of yourself. You're not doubting yourself. Honest explanations bring relief, not exhaustion. So if you are constantly walking away from these conversations feeling like you've been spun in circles, feeling like you always lose, and I know these relationships are not supposed to be about winning or losing, but hear me out, right? This explanation is functioning as control. Watch how the same early scene keeps repeating with more cost. You start the relationship thinking, we need better communication. That's so cliche, right? And months later, you're thinking, maybe I'm too sensitive. And eventually it's, my God, I don't even trust my own judgment anymore. I don't even know. I have no idea. That progression is the erosion. When people talk about erosion of self, there it is. And it explains why nothing you try works. You're not missing the right words. You're not engaging with a structure that is designed to be something for both of you. It's designed to keep you specifically off balance. Subscribe for more content that exposes these abusive men's tactics. Now, if you're still in this dynamic right now and you're still sorting through, you're still hesitating, you're still trying to figure things out, She Rises Collective is my online community where women stay supported while they see these patterns super clearly and they decide what they want to do next. Inside, we've got weekly group coaching, education, community, real-time support. So if you're stuck in attachment and your body just keeps pulling you back into this insane conversation, even though I bet you your mind knows better, consider joining the Trauma Bond Recovery Group Coaching Program that I co-host with Dr. Peter Salerno. We work directly on breaking that pull and creating detachment. It's for women who know that something is wrong, but you feel unable to let go, even when you kind of understand it intellectually. So hit subscribe because the more accurately you can name what the hell you've been living inside, the less power it has over you. The lie that keeps you stuck is not the one that you can disprove. It's the one that just sounds reasonable enough while teaching you to doubt yourself.